Welcome back to Cambridge Inside Out. It's still Super Tuesday.
Yes, and I'm still Judy Nathans.
And I'm still Super Robert.
Right. And you still have 2 hours.
2 hours to vote.
Right.
33 polling locations around the state.
And if they don't, you have to be registered, but I guess you can go to the secretaryofstate.gov.
Actually, I actually use that. You can not only use the Secretary of State's site to find out your polling place.
Yeah.
You can actually punch in your address and it'll show you everything that's on your ballot. I actually used it because when I was, as I mentioned in the first half hour, I was asking people to write me in for the Ward 6 Democratic City Committee.
You wanted to see
one of the people I sent a message to, they said, well, who's on the ballot? And I said, well, I've got a paper one. I'm not going to type them all in for you here.
And then you found it.
And then I just went to the site. There it was, and was copy, paste into the message.
So is that required of every voting locality that they
I think
have
it's
their
really,
ballot?
the Secretary of State's office has really done their due diligence.
I would love to find it here. Why don't you talk and I can find it, see if
see if you can sort of find that here. So anyway, one of the things we thought about doing is sort of like a bit of a, we're just the talking heads here today, right?
Right.
The truth is that each of us have our own civic and political histories dating back quite a while, and some of the people who know me personally, people who know Judy personally, may know a lot of, maybe have walked the same path for many years.
Maybe, yeah.
But it's, just
Secretary of State Mass? How do we do that?
It's just mass.gov, and then you can go to the Secretary of State's office.
Go ahead. You keep talking.
But just so you know, I have kind of an interesting, at least to me, I find it interesting. It's kind of a broken political history. In that when I was very young, I was very politically active, and then went into a long period of absolutely zero political activity.
Was this in college or after college?
Kind of starting college and on. Like a lot of people, they go to college, they become political. I went to college, became apolitical. Right? Everything was the opposite, and only really revived my interest in it much later on. And in some respects, still have sort of retained a little bit of distaste for politics, like civics, until very recently. I'm starting to get a little bit of the taste again. Wow. But some of you may know my tale here, but my very first political activity was one of my very, very best friends when I was a kid was a guy named Freddie Rich. He was in New York, we were living in New York City at the time, and his family was very influential on me. They were a black family, professionals, and they had a really strong liking for Robert F. Kennedy.
Interesting. Yeah.
And they convinced me and this other fellow who was part of our little group of friends to go and do phone banking for Robert F. Kennedy.
That's amazing.
And we did it, and he was murdered that night. So,
June 7th, right?
Yeah, and it was kind of a harsh entry into political consciousness for me. So that was 1968. I was 13 years old.
Gosh.
Right, doing phone banking. I imagine phone banking has changed a lot, but back then it was like a little piece of paper with a script, and you just actually made real phone calls.
Yeah.
And you didn't get any
cell phones. It was real landlines.
On the other hand, you didn't get anybody's answering machine because people didn't have answering machines either then. Maybe some people did, but they were even those were they were not common. So anyway, that was my beginnings to that. And I think after the assassination, I then worked, I think probably did some work I did work for Hubert Humphrey's campaign. But the thing is the real fervor had sort of been lost there. And then the following year, worked, because it was New York City, I actually worked for the Liberal candidate at the time, John Lindsay. Who was the mayoral candidate. Oh, yeah, and I was out there working hard for John Lindsay.
So you really were very politically active.
It was every day. I was out there handing out literature, going to events.
And your friend did this with you?
No, I don't remember if Freddie was. I think that was just more in the start. But then I just sort of took to it like a duck to water. And then that carried on into, by the time I went to high school a year later, 1970, it was fall of 70, not only was I continuing to support political campaigns in a whole range of political campaigns. But by then, I was the guy who I kind of laugh at today, who sets out a little card table out in the public square with lots of literature for various sort of like radical causes. And I was up there. I was selling the Black Panther magazine.
Wow.
and various other things. My goal was to get I wanted a Viet Cong flag. We were very anti-Vietnam War in those days.
Well, I was anti-Vietnam War, but that's different than establishment politics. I mean, if you were
that's right.
for John Lindsay,
that's right. And there was always a kind of a friction, because if you were, it all wanted to be involved in establishment politics, people would think you were like selling out, right? Right. You're not sufficiently radical or whatever. So I kind of straddled both of those a bit there in 70. And actually, there's one little funny story about it. There was one guy, and this was in Flushing, New York. I used to cut school to just do politics out on the street. There was this fellow who was active. He was kind of a conservative fellow named Peter, and he would come by and he would just sort of thrash me, going, you, this, that. We didn't even know each other, but he would sort of, we'd get into arguments about it. So the funny thing is that Peter, that's Peter Zaremba, who for the last 4 decades has been the lead singer of the Fleshtones, which is a New York City New Age rock. And we're like fast friends, and we're both, he was very much hard right, I was hard left, and we both became very happy moderates over time. So there's hope for the world, I suppose. And we've been fast friends ever since. But I still remember that, in fact, we were sort of, yelling at each other across the card table in those days. And then I have to say, so we did Vietnam War rallies in the 19...
That was where I can identify the most.
The moratoriums.
Sure. I went to Washington.
Yeah.
700,000 people, whatever.
I remember one where John Kerry was he was a very, very effective spokesperson at the Armed Services Committee.
Yes.
Arguing against the war as a Vietnam veteran. I retained respect for the man for many, many, many years.
But then why, this has come up, he, along with Hillary, voted for that vote that she's continually having to...
On the Iraq War?
Yeah. And yet he was... And my theory is that... Because he did run for president. Right. I think people that had skin in the game were very careful with that vote. Bernie didn't vote for it. Ted Kennedy, he wasn't going to run for president. He didn't vote for it. And of course we know Obama, but he wasn't in the Senate. That's the thing about... So I wonder.
My feeling is this, is that, and it's something actually I find myself resenting these days, when people are saying, "Oh, Bernie Sanders, he's the pure, ideologically pure."
That's who he is.
Well, the
and
truth
he doesn't mind being that.
But the thing is, when you've got nothing on the table.
That's what I said.
Right.
That's what I mean.
You got no skin in the game. You're exactly right about that.
I'm not saying that's good or bad, but if you're going to play politics and the way it is, you are going to have every decision is going to be looked at. Like, what's the future? What does this mean?
That's right. I've said this for years. Is that I fully respect political decisions. Yeah. If you basically do the calculation, and you say, well, if I vote this way here, I'm going to get creamed. Yeah. Then what are you going to do? You're going to really die on that hill? Come on. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, sometimes you make choices, and they are somewhat political. Right. And in a situation like that, your vote isn't what was going to be the deciding vote either. Right. I think that was sort of an overwhelmingly lopsided vote. So you make a political decision. Yeah. And it's interesting. People talk about, gee, Elizabeth Warren hasn't come out for anyone. Well, yeah, I'm not surprised, because she does have skin in the game, and if she endorses one or the other, it's going to define her. That's right. So she is... So a non-vote is just as political as... she will eventually endorse the nominee, probably. I would be shocked if she comes out before that. Right. But... So I'm just saying, anyway, this is interesting, because my daughter brought, I pulled up this ballot, if you want to go to. This is based on my address. This is one here. So this, I'm going to give a lot of credit to Bill Galvin, the Secretary of State, for his office actually getting this, making this available. Let's see if I... Yeah, but I don't remember Martin O'Malley on it. Was he on yours? He's on there, yeah. I was fact, what I found curious, I mean, I didn't know about Rocky de la Fuente.
Right, but
and I knew you still. The thing is, you get on the ballot well along a while ago.
All right, why is Bernie's name first? And you tell me, is this random? Because my daughter said that about her ballot. I'm pulling this up, and it's here, and on mine it was too.
There's lots of different criteria for it. I believe I think it might be on mine. I think it was like they draw lots.
Not good.
They just draw lots, and the thing is that you pull it out, and if you luck out, you luck out.
Well, he lucked out.
Right in the Cambridge.
Cambridge, or I'm going to pull up a number.
I don't know.
Well, while we're talking, I'm going to pull up somewhere out in the state.
But what I found interesting was this is the first time I just haven't been paying attention, but I didn't know that you actually could vote for no preference.
Yeah, I didn't realize that either.
None of the above.
There's no write-in, right? You can't write in on a primary. I don't think.
Well, no. The thing is, this isn't the ballot. Right?
Yes, it says a ballot. Well, this is not a ballot. It's not an official ballot.
Not a ballot. This just shows the preferences that are listed, right? Like it shows your ward committee. It doesn't have the write-ins in there, but the thing is, the actual ballot has spaces for write-ins.
Right, so but that does have the people down.
Right. So on the actual ballot, there's space for write-ins for every single one of these.
All right.
Yes.
All right. Go back to. I'm going to check somebody else's town.
But I say I thought that was a wonderful resource, and with every passing year, the system becomes better.
Right.
More informative. Good for him. Nice going. And that was just great. All right. I was going to say, let's get a couple more things out my own sort of political world here.
That's right.
So there I was, this sort of gung-ho, kind of radicalized this and that. And I think I did 1971. I was still involved in this stuff and, gung-ho, wearing my old beat-up army suit with my impeach Nixon. I wore an impeach Nixon button for, I think,
oh my goodness, that's
3 years.
He was, and quit though before they did.
And then I zoned out of politics, honestly. But I think I made it as far as I was doing the boycott lettuce, doing pickets in front of stores. Mm-hmm. I did it all, and then I think it was really 1972. I thought George McGovern was a good candidate for president, and he got slaughtered in a landslide, and it wasn't like I became despondent.
Massachusetts was the only state.
But I was in New York at the time.
Yeah, I was here.
And my response to that election, I said, well, maybe I'm a little tired of politics. So that was 72, and then
when was McCarthy? Or was that the same? Was that the same year, and then he didn't come to nominee?
McCarthy was 68, I think, actually.
Gosh,
in fact, that was a bit of the friction. Do you support McCarthy? I think what happened was...
No, 68 was... No, I was. My first vote was for Hubert Humphrey. Oh, right, right. So it would have been because he became the nominee.
That's right.
And Nixon won.
And Nixon won big. Yeah.
Okay, so the protest.
So in '72, I think when Nixon won big, and I was just an impeach Nixon kind of guy from the get-go. Before Watergate, by the way, I wore an impeach Nixon button. All right, and when he was actually impeached, I was like the last guy to know. I was just traveling across the country, just doing my next phase of my life. I had no idea. I found out about it on a truck stop in Pennsylvania. It was actually this true story. I actually going through a truck stop in 84 Pennsylvania, right on Interstate 84, and I see I wasn't following the Watergate hearings at all. I didn't care, and
Watergate hearings.
I had totally checked out from political stuff. I just didn't care, and there was a headline: Nixon to resign Friday, and I went, what? Wow. I had no idea. So it was, what I had wanted for years. It just came true.
That's funny.
But it was interesting. I mean, by the time 70, by the time I broke out of was ending my adolescence, I was becoming apolitical.
Wow.
And I stayed that way for a long, long time.
So when did you get reinstated?
Well, I mean, I got interested in mathematics. I played Frisbee, got interested in women, right? I lived my life. I traveled the country.
Oh, you mean while you weren't involved in that?
Totally apolitical.
What ignited you again? Moving to Cambridge? Or?
Well, honestly, it took a long, long time. But I traveled the country. I hitchhiked around. I, did all the things that a footloose, fancy-free kind of guy would do. And honestly, not until I was into mathematics, right? So I sort of settled down into my wonderful world of mathematics. And actually, it was not until I moved into Cambridge in '78, still apolitical.
Yeah.
I think I bought my house in 1985. And to be perfectly honest, I think that's probably when I started becoming interested in civics, which is different than politics.
Yeah.
And, got interested in water and sewer issues, and then recycling in 89.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
And by 91, I was not political, but people then started asking me to join the Cambridge Civic Association and get locally political.
Why were they asking you? Because of the other things you had done?
Yeah, I think there were a lot of volunteers with the recycling program, and I think they kind of thought that I would be sort of a good way to bring people in. And by 93, then I was a candidate, a reluctant candidate, mind you, but a candidate. So slowly but surely became a little more political. But honestly, I really didn't get too interested in national politics. And maybe because I just didn't want to get burned, pardon the pun, it's not B-E-R, actual
right,
burned.
Yeah.
I think it was 2000, the Bush-Gore fiasco is probably what started getting me a little more jazzed again.
Yes. Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, but even there I just said, oh well, you learn to live with things you don't love. And you just get through it. And I've kind of felt that way about national level politics for some time. It's sort of like, well, not to sound like a downer about this, but I said, I have no influence in this. The country's going to do what it's going to do, and you just sort of learn to live with it, whatever it is. I have to say, this year, in a kind of a twisted way, this is from an electoral and national political perspective, this is, I think, just as a disgustingly weird year.
Well, because
I'm thrilled that Hillary Clinton's running, but other than that, I find the whole thing cartoonish.
Yeah.
Yet now I'm finding myself getting more interested in large-scale politics again. Maybe because I feel I have to.
In 08, the whole
Less so.
Obama, Hillary, and the clowns, most of the clowns on the Republican side. Do you remember what was going on there?
Not really. I mean, the thing is that I didn't despise Romney. I thought he was sort of pretty neutral. I didn't despise McCain.
Oh, wait a minute.
I thought he was pretty neutral.
08, not 012. 12 was Romney.
Right.
08 was John McCain and Sarah Palin?
Palin was bewildering to me. But
I mean, just saying the craziness. Right. I mean, when you have the Rick Perrys and
well, then now that's when I think it's just.
John McCain looks great right now.
Right. So McCain.
Except if he hadn't made that choice of Sarah Palin, he may have had a better chance.
He would have had a better chance.
Although I don't know, Obama was.
I think it was sort of like a Hail Mary pass. That it was a pretty bad pass.
Yeah.
I mean, you could use a lot better judgment than what he showed in that particular choice. So I am officially more interested in politics now than I have been since I was 13.
Interesting. Okay. Well.
And maybe I'll get very disinterested soon. We'll see.
Well, depending on what happens in November, Canada is saying, okay, I don't know if we can take all you people. Which is a joke.
Yeah, but a lot of people say that because they feel despondent. But I think what you really would have happen if, let's just say the worst case scenario happens and you end up with a President Trump.
Or even Cruz.
I don't see that happening.
He's an ideologue.
But there are countries like really horrifying, like under Saddam Hussein.
Yes.
Somehow people manage to live lives and sell fruit.
Well, but also the difference, we can protest here.
We can protest.
And hopefully we won't be shot for it, but you never know.
But even in really oppressive regimes, people just find ways of living. I always say sounds very mathematical, but they learn to live perpendicular to.
Well,
world.
speaking of Saddam Hussein, I'm not sure his was as oppressive as some others that we have.
No, what followed him is
at least they had electricity. Kids went to school.
Actually,
it was a little more secular.
My friend David, the same David I mentioned earlier, he's working in community development work in those very countries.
Really?
And basically, what happened when Saddam was insane, it was the Sunnis had access to all the electricity and whatever, and they would screw the other ethnic minority.
Oh.
And when they took over, what happened then was it switched. So I
thought the Shiites took
so then the Shia got more influence and power.
Yeah.
And then what did they do? Well, in a sectarian setting, they just screwed the Sunnis. So they
that's true.
And then it was back and forth retribution and whatever. So
terrible.
Anyway, so see, Cambridge InsideOut went national like last week. Now we're getting international. Where's this going?
It all comes to because Cambridge is always kind of. Remember when they used to take votes on foreign?
I know, and they
don't do that anymore.
I know, and I would always speak. resentfully
known for doing
about
that?
it.
Somebody used to do that.
Oh, there were a few particular. Marjorie used to do it a lot.
Oh, yeah.
But
Okay.
she wasn't the only one.
No, she wasn't.
I mean, I personally, I would prefer a city council that just makes the city run well.
Yes, and I think that's
my
really
priority.
kind of where it's.
If you want to sort of do a little hoop-de-loop,
Yeah,
fine. But
right.
it doesn't really do much for me.
Right.
Personally. So.
But So anyway, So I got mostly involved in 08, and I don't. I think I just heard the call, or someone said, "You want to do this?" And then I ended up going to Scranton, Pennsylvania 3 times because.
Yeah.
Hillary's father was born in Scranton.
Okay.
And then Pennsylvania was I don't know if it's a swing state, but it's an interesting state. It's very big, and it's got different.
And it can go either way in a state.
constituencies,
So I would
yes.
call it a swing state.
Right. So
Yeah.
we went there several times, and I would say my biggest takeaway from all that was that I met women who just had never. I met a woman on the street who had never voted, and she got her neighbor to register for her. She was in her 60s, so she could vote for Hillary. So it was like she spoke to so many women that either were under their husband's,
Right.
control, and it was very powerful. And I think unless you
so
feel
much
that,
like 08
Yeah.
with Barack Obama.
yes,
people
exactly.
were-
So that's why
who
those
never
two
felt they had a
races.
stake in the
You had a
game.
woman and an African American. Who was half white. People keep forgetting
Yeah,
that.
sure.
But although Ben Carson recently has brought that up, how he's not black or whatever.
But yeah, it is.
But that was what was historic about it. That you had these two really non-mainstream candidates.
Right, and then it does
Yeah.
what it energizes certain voters
Yes.
who might not otherwise be nearly
Right.
so energized, and it really does tip the balance.
Yeah.
In many ways, I think the Obama phenomenon has redefined the Democratic Party.
Yes.
And I think people
a good
know
way,
that.
I think.
it's in a great
Yeah.
way. But the thing is that it's right now. You have to work out how African American
Right.
voters are going to vote. It's definitely part of the equation if you want to
Yeah.
be successful,
Right.
at least amongst
Right.
the Democratic
Yeah.
Party.
Yeah.
Hopefully, one day it'll be sort of just part of the way everybody thinks. But
That's
we'll
what
see.
we all think. Yeah.
Yeah, it is kind of a strange irony, though, in this country. And maybe we're seeing it sort of microcosmically right now that suffrage for Black Americans, in principle, happened in the 1860s, or really before that. You could be a freeman
Yeah.
and vote. But suffrage for women didn't happen until
Black
1919.
men could vote before women.
Absolutely. So,
Right.
it seems like
makes sense that this
the
is-
country is a
Yeah.
slow-moving country
Right.
in many
it's
ways.
still kind of men.
Yeah, I mean,
men,
and
yeah.
Jim Crow laws notwithstanding,
Yeah.
it was
Yep.
and the century of
Right.
trying to get it right,
Right.
notwithstanding,
Yeah.
Empowerment, at least from the point of view of voting for
Yes.
Black Americans, way predates by a half a century suffrage for women.
Yeah.
And it is kind of in a very shorter time frame. So there's a Black man is elected president, and now it's sort of like the
It's gonna
same
be
sequence.
it really, I
You
just
see.
feel it in my, this a few weeks ago, it just sort of hit me intuitively that she will be the president. Because I think there's no one out there that can stand in her way. I mean, Bernie, I love you, Bernie. I love your ideas, but
I don't think
if I want to live, I would move to France or one of the places that, you
I
get
don't think
this,
it's.
but
I think the one thing, the great unknown here
Yeah.
is just to see to what degree does propaganda work? Because regardless who ends up as the nominees, then we enter into this phase from the summer on into the fall.
I'm not looking forward to
where
that.
it's-
Well, also they say the FBI is going to, bring this indictment against her about the emails and how can we have a candidate? Oh, come on, give me a break.
I know. No, that's the
And
sort
don't
of
you-
political activity
and
that
one more
shouldn't
thing I'm
happen.
going to say that's kind of national, but why is it that the State Department releases more emails the day before every primary the last 3 weeks? I've been
Right.
looking at it. Every day before a primary, all of a sudden her emails. Who in the State
I
Department
don't
has
know.
it out for her?
I don't know. I
You
don't
know?
know. But
It's-
but that's the thing is that right now we tend to look at what's happening this week.
Yeah.
What's the poll saying this week?
You're right.
Who's ahead this week? Eventually there will be a nominee
Yeah.
for both major
Whose
parties.
convention is first? I know they're both
I
in
should know,
July.
but I've actually forgotten.
Yeah, because I think that's going to be interesting.
Yeah, but then once it happens, then I think you're going to see, you're going to see the bottles uncorked in terms of campaign spending to send propagandish messages
Right.
for both sides, quite honestly.
Right.
And that may really redefine everything.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, people have speculated, said, well, if Sanders was the nominee, then they're going to just slaughter him with propaganda. Karl Marx running for president.
He's like an open book. I mean, we're not going to have a, we're going to probably call him a communist.
So you end up with a particular type of propaganda that will go for that. If Hillary Clinton's the nominee, which is more likely, then there'll be a different type of propaganda.
Yeah. She's a liar. She's this.
But the thing is that the Democrats will do. Well, I think I have to say the Republicans make it pretty easy to.
I know. I mean, my goodness. I mean,
Yeah. So anyway, it'll be.
I think they have such a problem on their hands, the Republicans, and also the whole thing with the Supreme Court nomination. That's going to come back to really.
I think that's really true.
It's going to make them look like the obstructionists they've been.
Yeah. All right, just to bring Cambridge, we were doing Cambridge outside. Let's go back in just briefly for the last couple minutes
but
here.
One more time, you still have an hour and
still have an hour and a half to vote.
An hour and a half to vote if you haven't voted.
So please do it. Now, one other thing that was more contentious than I thought it was warranted was there was a big back and forth about plans to do some revitalization changes in the area
Are we going back to City Council?
Yeah, just a bit briefly. With the kiosk area in Harvard Square. Really, it's the whole plaza. The T station, head house, the information kiosk, the whole plaza.
Harvard Square.
Yeah, there are some plans, preliminary plans in place for doing some reconfiguration, making this all a little bit better. There's also some need because of some decaying situations. So people went back and forth. Now, what usually happens here is that you basically give it over to the city agency. They start a public process. There's a lot of input, whatever. But two of the councilors, I'm not even going to name them here, wanted to say, well, we need to have hearings on this, and sort of we're going to vet this process. And I thought to myself,
hearings on what? What goes there, or?
Yeah, and I thought, so is that really the new function of the city council? Is to analyze what sort of siding should be on the T head house, and whether the information kiosk should be here, there, or whatever.
That sounds off.
I said that's just
another
nutty.
Department. Isn't that community development?
Yeah, and the thing is, and anybody can have input. The city councilors can have input. But this is not something that should be in front of a city council committee. But that was one of the other points of discussion at the meeting.
So there was just discussion. There was no decision made on that or vote?
Well, I mean, they agreed to move forward with it, but it will still, I think, probably get some hearing, a little time at a hearing here. So anyway, so I think that's it pretty much. And so anyway,
so
until
next week
time,
we'll have some interesting Cambridge results, right?
See you then.
Good night.